For the latest on this, let's speak with our correspondent in New York, Sherwin Bryce-Pease. Well, Sherwin, very good afternoon to you, perhaps good morning to you there. So there are a number of elements here. Explain how the process will unfold in the House of Representatives this week after Nancy Pelosi's letter to her caucus yesterday.
Yeah, good afternoon, Colin. We got clarity from the Speaker of the House yesterday. Of course, there was expectation that the House of Representatives would move expeditiously to take some form of action against the President following those devastating events on Capitol Hill last Wednesday. And we got clarity yesterday from Nancy Pelosi, who sent a letter to her Democratic caucus in the House. And I just want to read you a little bit of what that letter says. She writes, "In protecting our Constitution and our democracy, we will act with urgency because this president represents an imminent threat to both. As the days go by, the horror of the ongoing assault on our democracy perpetrated by this president is intensified, and so is the immediate need for action." So what we expect to happen today in the House of Representatives, the Speaker will introduce a resolution to call on the Vice President Mike Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment. What they are seeking to achieve in the House is to pass that resolution through unanimous consent, essentially without an objection from any of the 435 members of the House. That probably won't happen given long-standing and broad Republican support for this president, despite what happened on Wednesday. So there is likely to be an objection. Then what happens is she will move to have a vote on the resolution to ask or certainly to call on Vice President Mike Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment, which essentially is an action by the Vice President and a majority of President Trump's cabinet that decides that he is no longer fit to hold the office of the president. So there will then be a vote in the absence of a unanimous consent resolution. That vote requires a simple majority. So half the House plus one, and Democrats, of course, have the majority. So that is expected to pass. Whether Mike Pence acts are based on that resolution or not is an open question. The early indications right now, Colin, is that he will not act, and therefore the House will then move 24 hours post his inaction to introduce articles of impeachment, which will circumvent the normal committee process, go straight to a vote on the floor, and then it's going to be a question as to if those articles of impeachment pass, when those will then be transferred to the United States Senate for the trial that is meant to either convict or exonerate the president. Hakeem Jeffries is the Democratic chairperson of the Democratic caucus in the House. He tried to explain what's going to happen today. Let's watch.
The insurrection that was violently perpetrated by enemy combatants and seditionists was an attempt to halt a constitutional process and overthrow the government. It was an act of sedition that was incited and encouraged by Donald Trump. It's my expectation that on Monday, a privileged resolution will be introduced that will charge the President of the United States with inciting sedition. The vehicle of a privileged resolution will allow the House to move expeditiously to consider the article of impeachment on the floor of the House of Representatives, to vote it out, and to send it over to the Senate without having to go through a traditional Judiciary Committee markup.
So he's explaining there, Colin, that a privilege resolution would then circumvent the need for those judicial committee hearings that, in terms of gathering the evidence. They feel they have enough evidence. They feel that also, given the fact that the president has 9 days left in office, that they need to move quickly here. And so we are going to see, just days after those events on Capitol Hill last week, action from the House of Representatives as early as today, Colin.
Yeah, social media companies have moved en masse to ban the president from its platforms over concern that he will continue to incite violence. How is that playing, particularly among his supporters?
Yeah, so we are expecting, there is some speculation that we will hear from President Donald Trump at some point today, specifically to take on these decisions by the social media companies to essentially ban him. The list is growing. Twitter, with his 88 million followers, has banned him. I mean, that was a pretty big decision. And the silence, that has permeated these, this country, given the shackles that have been essentially placed on this president, has been quite a shift in tone in this country. Facebook, of course, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. Stripe is a payment processing software company that has processed donations through the Trump campaign website. They are withdrawing their services. The Professional Golfers Association, the PGA, has cancelled plans for the Trump golf course in Bedminster, New Jersey, to be the host of the 2022 PGA Championship, which is the major there. And of course, this is infuriating the president. We understand he is very bitter about this decision and could come out as early as today to take on these social media companies. What he will say will be certainly left to that moment when he appears before a microphone. But remember, they're talking here about how a president is being muddled, but this is the president of the United States. He can do various interviews. He can go and speak in the press conference room at the White House. He has various avenues available to him, despite the bans from social media, for him to go out and articulate his message. I can also tell you that an alternative to Twitter, the social media platform called Parler, which has become a favorite of right-wing conservatives in the United States, they too now have been banned by various hosting companies. Google, Apple, Amazon have basically banned them from the platform, because they are concerned that they are not moderating the conversations that are happening on their platforms. And the concern there is that without that moderation, discussions to incite violence continue. And so certainly a lot of action here from private companies against the rhetoric that we are seeing, certainly from right-wing quarters in this country, Colin.
So, Sherwin, President-elect Joe Biden ran on a platform of bringing the country together, of changing the tone of the country towards great unity. How could impeachment of President Trump complicate his efforts just 9 days before he's due to take the oath of office?
Yeah, he was, of course, the candidate that ran on the unity ticket, that he was, speaking to the division and the fracture that we have, certainly in politics and in society in this country. And that really was the wind behind his back in terms of beating President Trump in last November's election. He was asked this very specific question, whether he supported congressional action to impeach the president. Of course, this would be the first time in history that a sitting president has been impeached twice by the United States Congress within a year. Essentially, he was exonerated by the Senate in that trial in February, and not even a year later, we are now starting a process again. Biden said he was focused on the virus and the pandemic. He was focused on vaccine distribution and economic growth, and that he would leave it to the Congress to decide here how they wanted to deal with these infractions, these alleged infractions from the president. And he said what Congress decides to do is up to them to decide. He's focused, I think, on his inauguration in 9 days, and he believes that's probably going to be the quickest way to get rid of President Trump.
Now, Sherwin, to what extent are Republicans shifting away from the president after last week's events?
I mean, it's not a big number. It's a bigger number. Certainly, we've heard from a number of Senate Republicans that have gone on the record to certainly criticize the actions from the president, the rhetoric that led to that rioting mob on Congress. Some members of Congress have said, of the House of Representatives, indicated that they do support action against the president. They do support and will vote in favor of impeachment, but it's certainly a minority of the Republican Party that has come out against this president, because despite everything that has happened, President Trump still enjoys a great deal of support within the Republican Party, and despite what happens, whether he's impeached or not, will still have that platform within the Republican Party post his presidency, and the political persuasion that he will still be able to generate is something that Republicans are not quite ready to dismiss it yet.
All right, Sherwin, thank you so much for making time to give us an update, and we'll keep our ears on the ground through you right there in Washington. or rather New York, I beg your pardon.